Welcome to the mini book podcast, Proof of Christ edition. I am so excited to be here with you today.
It's great to be here.
We are going to be opening up a text that is, well, it's a real heavy hitter. It's almost like a historical detective story.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about how on earth did Jesus become a god? Historical questions about earliest devotion to Jesus by the scholar Larry W. Hurtado.
And detective story is the perfect way to put it. This book isn't just, recounting history. It's tackling a massive, massive mystery.
It really is. And before we get into the investigation, I just want to say this specifically. We thank you for listening, and please consider subscribing for future content.
It really helps.
And after you hear this, we really encourage you to go out and purchase this book, support the author. It's a dense read, for sure, but it is so worth it if you want to understand the foundations.
Absolutely. Supporting scholarship like this is just vital.
I also want to mention right up front that the voices you're hearing are in fact generated by AI, but all of the content comes straight from the book.
We've done the homework.
We have. And honestly, we feel that this is a great way to learn why Jesus Christ is God, not just from a faith perspective, but from looking at the actual historical footprint.
That's the core of it. The history itself points to his divinity.
So let's unpack this. The title alone, How on Earth Did Jesus Become a God? To our ears, that sounds a little strange, right? We're so used to the idea.
We are, but Hurtado wants us to step back, to put on the sandals of a first-century observer.
You have to strip away 2,000 years of history.
Exactly. Forget the cathedrals, the creeds, all of it. Just look at the raw facts. You have a Jewish figure, Jesus of Nazareth.
Teacher.
One who upsets the authorities.
Right. And then he's executed by the Roman state as a criminal.
And crucifixion wasn't just, an execution. It was designed to be shameful, the ultimate humiliation.
Precisely. And normally, when a leader is crucified, that's it. The movement dies with him. But here, almost immediately after his death, you have people worshiping him.
And worship is the key word there. They weren't just respecting him as a martyr. No, not at all. They were giving him the kind of devotion that was reserved strictly for the one creator of the universe.
So that's the mystery. How do you get from a Roman cross to a divine throne so fast?
It's completely counterintuitive.
Now, I know for a long time the standard explanation was, well, it happened slowly.
Yeah.
Like a game of historical telephone over the centuries?
That was the dominant theory, yeah, for a very long time. It was popularized by a group we call the History of Religion School, or if you want the German,
I was going to ask.
the Religionsgeschichtliche Schule. The main scholar there was a man named Wilhelm Bucer back in the early 1900s.
Okay, so what was their argument, basically?
They proposed what's called an evolutionary model.
Yeah.
The idea was that Jesus, in the minds of his first followers, he started out as just a man, a prophet, maybe the Messiah, but human.
And then the movement spread.
Exactly. It moved out of its Jewish homeland and into the broader Greek and Roman world, the pagan world. And it started, picking up pagan ideas.
Right, because the pagans were already used to worshiping humans, weren't they? Like the emperors.
That's the perfect example. In the pagan world, that line between gods and humans was, it was incredibly blurry. You had heroes like Hercules who become gods. You had emperors claiming to be divine.
There's a word for that, isn't there?
Yes, apotheosis.
Apotheosis. Let's break that down.
It just means the elevation of a human being to divine status. So the old theory was, as Christianity became more Gentile, they copied this pagan idea. They saw Romans worshiping Caesar and thought, we should do that with Jesus.
So it was a gradual change over, say, 100 or 200 years.
That was the idea. But Hurtado comes along and he completely flips the table on that.
Oh!
The math just doesn't work. The timeline is the killer for the evolutionary theory. Hurtado points us to the letters of Paul.
Which we can date pretty accurately.
Very accurately. To between roughly 50 and 60 CE.
Okay, so let's do the math. Jesus is crucified around 30 CE. Paul is writing only 20 years later.
And in ancient history, 20 years is.
It's nothing.
It's the blink of an eye. And when you actually read Paul's letters, what do you find? It's not some low view of Jesus that's slowly getting higher. It's a fully formed cosmic view of Jesus.
She already talks about him as divine.
Divine, pre-existent, the agent of creation.
Like in 1 Corinthians 8.6, he puts Jesus right inside the definition of the one God.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. Paul doesn't act like he invented this. He talks about it as something he received. He's quoting hymns and creeds that were already there before he wrote.
So if he's writing 20 years later, but quoting things that are even older than that.
We're pushing this belief right back to the beginning, the first few years, maybe even the first few months.
Wow.
As the scholar Martin Hengel said, and Hurtado quotes him, in essentials, more happened in the first few years than in the next 7 centuries.
That is just a staggering thought. It wasn't a later Greek idea. It was there from day one. A volcanic eruption of faith.
Volcanic eruption is Hurtado's exact image. It was sudden, it was hot, and it reshaped the entire landscape immediately.
But wait, this raises a huge problem. If this happened right away, then the people doing the worshiping were Jews.
They were.
And Jews were, well, famously stubborn about who they worshipped.
And that's the second pillar of Hurtado's entire argument. You have to understand the Jewish context.
Right, because if you told me a Roman started worshiping a new god, I'd say, okay, sure, add one to the pile.
Exactly. Pagans were polytheistic, but Second Temple Judaism was defined by exclusive monotheism.
Okay, let's break that down. Monotheism, one god. What's the exclusive part mean?
It means they were, historically allergic to idolatry. They wouldn't just believe in one god. They would refuse to worship anyone else. Jews in the first century would literally die before they'd worship an image of the emperor.
They had this hard, bright line. There's the creator, and then there's everything else.
And you do not cross that line. So for a group of these strict, exclusive, monotheistic Jews to suddenly start worshiping a man from Nazareth, sociologically, that should not happen.
It's like a group of, I don't know, strict vegans suddenly opening a steakhouse.
That's a great analogy. It goes against their deepest identity, which is why Hurtado says they absolutely did not borrow this from the pagans.
A devout Jew would have seen that as idolatry.
Exactly. So if the change didn't come from the outside, it had to come from the inside. Hurtado calls it a mutation.
A mutation, like in biology.
Yes. A mutation happens within a species. He argues this was a mutation within Judaism. They kept the commitment to one God, but they radically expanded the definition of that one God to include Jesus.
Which brings us to another term he uses a lot, binitarianism. What does that mean?
So binitarian, from binary, meaning two, Hurtado describes the earliest Christian faith as binitarian monotheism. It's not ditheism, two separate gods.
That would be heresy for a Jew.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Instead, it's one God, but that one God is now understood to be comprised of two figures, God the Father and Jesus the Lord.
So they're not abandoning monotheism, they're redefining it. They're saying Jesus is on the God side of that bright line.
He is, and Hurtado stresses this wasn't just some abstract idea. We see it most clearly in how they acted. He calls it the devotional pattern.
This is a huge distinction. It's one thing to say you respect Jesus. It's another thing entirely to, worship him.
Correct. And Hurtado outlines 6 specific cultic practices that show up right away. And when we say cultic, we don't mean it in the modern negative sense.
Just means the system of worship.
Right, the religious behaviors.
Okay, let's go through them. This is the evidence. What's number 1?
First is hymns. They were singing songs to Jesus.
Not just about him, like a folk hero.
No, singing praise directly to him in their gatherings. In a Jewish setting, you sing praise to God. To do that for a man would be shocking.
Okay, and number 2?
Prayer. We see them praying to God through Jesus, but also praying directly to Jesus. Think of Stephen in the book of Acts. As he's dying, he says, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit.
He's putting Jesus right in God's place there.
Precisely. Third is the use of the name, baptizing in his name, healing and performing exorcisms in his name. The name of God carried God's own power, so to use Jesus' name was to equate his authority with God's.
Right. What's number 4?
The Lord's Supper. This wasn't just a potluck to remember a dead friend. They believed the risen Jesus was present, presiding over the meal as the invisible Lord.
So an active interaction with him. And the 5th?
Confession. The ritual, public declaration, Jesus is Lord. That was a binding religious oath. And in a Roman world where the slogan was, Caesar is Lord.
That was politically dangerous.
And religiously radical. And finally, number 6 is prophecy. The early Christians believed the Holy Spirit was the spirit of Jesus. When a prophet spoke, it was the risen Jesus speaking to his people.
So you stack all that up, singing to him, praying to him, using his name, confessing him as Lord.
Yeah.
It looks exactly like worship.
It is worship, and this is Hurtado's point. You can search all the other Jewish texts from that time. You find figures like Moses or angels like Michael who are deeply respected, but you never find a group of Jews gathering every week to sing hymns to Moses.
Or pray to Michael.
Never. Jesus' status was completely unprecedented.
I want to zoom in on one piece of evidence he uses, because it's so powerful. It's the Philippians hymn.
Ah, yes, Philippians chapter 2.
Verses 6 through 11.
This is a perfect case study. Because again, this letter's from the mid-50s AD, but almost every scholar agrees Paul is quoting a hymn that was already old, a song the church was already singing.
So it's a window into the very beginning. And the lyrics, I mean, they're just astounding. It talks about Jesus existing in the form of God before he became human.
Right. So you get two massive concepts there. First, pre-existence. The idea that Jesus didn't begin at Bethlehem. He was already there, in the divine realm. The Greek is morphetheo, the very form of God.
And then there's that really complex Greek word, harpagmos.
Yes, harpagmos. It means something to be seized or exploited. The hymn says that even though he was equal with God, he didn't see that as something to be, exploited for his own gain. He humbled himself.
He emptied himself, became human, died on a cross. But then the hymn turns. God exalts him.
And gives him the name that is above every name.
And in a Jewish context, what is the one name above all names?
It has to be the name of God, Yahweh.
Exactly. So the hymn is claiming God gave Jesus his own personal name and authority. And then you get the climax, that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord.
And as beautiful as that is, Hurtado points out that those lyrics, they're borrowed.
They're a direct quote from the Old Testament.
From Isaiah chapter 45.
And why is that so significant?
Because Isaiah 45 is one of the most hardcore monotheistic passages in the entire Bible. God is speaking and he says, I am God and there is no other. And then God says to me, every knee shall bow, every tongue shall swear.
Whoa. So they took a verse where God says he alone is worthy of worship.
And they applied it directly to Jesus.
And they took God's exclusive right and just gave it to Jesus.
Yes. Historically speaking, that is the smoking gun. It shows they identified Jesus with the one God of Israel. They weren't making a second God. They were including him in the very identity of the one God.
It's incredible evidence. You don't accidentally apply Isaiah 45 to a carpenter from Nazareth.
No, you don't. Which brings us to the final, biggest question, the why.
Right. So we've established it happened fast. We've established it was unlikely for Jews to do this on their own. We've established how they worshipped him. But what on earth caused it?
This is where Hurtado argues you have to look at religious experience. This didn't happen because a committee got together and debated texts. It required powerful revelatory experiences.
You mean visions?
Visions, encounters, things that convinced them against all odds that Jesus was not only alive, but was exalted at God's right hand.
Like Paul on the road to Damascus.
That's the textbook example. Paul didn't lose a debate. He saw light, he heard a voice, he had a revelation of God's Son. Or think of Stephen seeing the heavens open up.
So for them, worshiping Jesus wasn't something they chose to do. They felt they had to.
That's the critical point. They believed it was the divine will. They believed God himself was demanding that they worship Jesus. To refuse would be to disobey the one God they had always served.
It wasn't them promoting him. It was God revealing him.
Exactly. And we know this conviction was there from the start because of the opposition.
Right. Paul himself was a persecutor before he became a believer.
And why was he persecuting them? He says it was for blasphemy. That proves that from the very beginning, Christians were making claims that sounded like blasphemy to other Jews. If they'd just said, Jesus was a great teacher, nobody would have cared.
The fact that they were getting into so much trouble proves how high their claims were.
The opposition confirms the claim.
This has been such a fascinating walk through Hurtado's work. It really reframes how you see the early church. It wasn't this slow fade into something else.
No, it was an explosion of belief, driven by powerful experiences, but anchored right within their Jewish faith.
It shows the belief in the divinity of Christ wasn't some later addition.
It was the bedrock, the big bang that started everything.
And like we said at the start, looking at this history is just a great way to learn why Jesus Christ is God. It shows that the people closest to the events saw him as nothing less than Lord.
And were willing to stake their lives on it.
Well, we want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mini Book Podcast, Proof of Christ Edition. We hope you found this exploration of Larry Hurtado's work as compelling as we did.
It is definitely a book that will make you think deeply.
And please, if you enjoyed our discussion today, hit that subscribe button. Tell a friend about the podcast. It really does help.
And we mean it. Please support the author. Go buy the book. Read it for yourself.
And we want to hear from you. What other books should we cover? Drop a suggestion for us in the comments. We're always looking for the next great text to explore together.
We really look forward to seeing your suggestions.
Thanks again for subscribing and for listening. Until next time.